Hi guys, we are in my kitchen this evening. I'm pre-recording this demo video for my culinary students on our quick bread recipe to die for blueberry muffins. This recipe was taken from the website allrecipes.com, and what I've done here is I printed my recipe and I have it close by so that I can have it ready to go. If you need to use an electronic device, just remember that it's always smart to set your preferences or settings so that your screen doesn't keep timing out and you have to keep touching your screen. Okay, so you want to make sure that you get all of your ingredients out and all of your tools out. What I wanted to show you first are the pans that you'll need for these muffins. So this recipe makes 24 muffins. So I have two 12-cup muffin pans here that I'm going to put muffin liners in. But what I wanted to point out to you is that one of my muffin pans is what's called a dark nonstick coated pan. So you can see there's a color difference between these. So what I am doing to accommodate the fact that one of my pans is a dark nonstick coated pan is this will conduct heat a little differently than this lighter pan. So whenever I'm using a dark nonstick pan, what I do is I bump my temperature that I'm supposed to preheat the oven down by 25 degrees. So this recipe tells us to preheat to 400. I actually preheated to 375. So depending on the kind of pans you have at home, you may or may not want to do that. So while I am getting my pans ready, I'm also going to show you that I have some paper muffin liners here. Now you don't have to use these. I just like them because they make for easier cleanup and they kind of make for a nice little wrapping for taking the muffins to go once they're all done and ready to be eaten. But if you don't have these, you can just take your muffin pan and you can spray some nonstick spray in here, or you could take melted butter or a little bit of vegetable oil and a paper towel and just coat all of the insides of these, and that would work as well if you didn't have paper muffin liners. So these pans are what you'll need. You'll need some instruments for measuring. You'll also need a few ingredients. And so we're gonna get started making this batter. Okay, now that I've got my surface sanitized, my hands are washed, and I've got my pans prepped and ready to go with the muffin liners on the side, I'm gonna go ahead and start putting together my batter. So I'm gonna use a clear glass bowl so that hopefully you can really see what we've got going on here. But the first ingredient that I want to address is buttermilk. So this recipe calls for 2/3 of a cup of buttermilk, which you can absolutely buy in the store. However, for today's recipe, I'm going to show you how do you substitute for buttermilk, which is going to be an acidic ingredient that's going to help our leavening agent and also give a really nice taste to our muffins. I'm going to show you how to substitute your regular milk with this. So the measurement for this is 2/3 of a cup. And so I'm going to go ahead and be just under that 2/3 of a cup measurement here of regular milk. I'm just using like some 2% milk here. And then I have 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. All right. And I'm going to pour that lemon juice in there. And that lemon juice is full of citric acid. And I'm just going to give that a little bit of a stir. Okay. And I'm going to let that sit while I take care of all of my other ingredients. Because what's going to happen is the reaction of that lemon juice in this regular milk is going to basically give us the same kind of a product as buttermilk would. So it's going to react with that milk and make it kind of a little bit soured. We wouldn't probably want to drink this, but in our recipe, it's going to kind of serve the same function as, you know, like a sour cream or another acidic ingredient. So I'm going to let this sit to the side while that's already measured and pull my ingredient bowls here. Now we are going to be doing something called the muffin method. And so I have 2 bowls for this. I have a dry bowl and a wet bowl that I'm going to be using. It doesn't matter what shapes the bowls are, just as long as you have enough room to create your final product. So in my dry bowl, I'm going to put my dry ingredients. So I need 3 cups of flour. I want to remember that when I'm measuring my flour, here I'll actually move this over for a second so you guys can kind of see this. That I am scooping it lightly into the measuring cup and then leveling it off. There's 1, 2, 3 cups of flour. There we go. And it tells us that we are going to do our flour and our sugar. For our sugar, we need 1.5 cups of sugar. So I'm using white granulated sugar and a 1/2 cup measuring cup. So I'll need 3 of these. So here's 1/2, 1 cup, 1.5 cups. There we go. Okay, and then it tells me that I also want to combine my salt, which is another dry ingredient. So I'm going to put 1 teaspoon of salt in here. And then I also am going to be using baking powder. This is double acting baking powder. Baking powder and baking soda are 2 very different ingredients. If you don't have baking powder, you have to figure out what is the substitute for baking soda with this. They're not the same ingredient, even though they can seem very similar. They're going to give lift to our final product, but what we are going to do is it's going to make the muffins rise, and so that's really important. So we need 1 tablespoon, so that's this big one here, 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon. So I'm going to come over here to my teaspoon. All right. And those are our dry ingredients. And I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that these are lightly mixed together so that they are nice and combined. Okay, so I'll just grab a whisk here and just get all of this combined. And the muffin method, which is what's used for this particular recipe, basically is a method not just for muffins. We use this for quick bread loaves, we use this for pancakes, we use this for lots of different things. And we have a dry bowl of ingredients, and this gets put to the side, and now we take care of our wet bowl of ingredients. And what's going to happen is we're going to pour the wet ingredients into the dry all at one time and then mix it up. So in our wet ingredient bowl, we're going to need some vegetable oil. It tells us that we need 2/3 of a cup of vegetable oil. So I'm going to use canola oil because it's just kind of a light colored vegetable oil that doesn't have a lot of flavor, unlike like an olive oil. So I'm just going to make sure that I go ahead and come down to eye level and get my 2/3 cup of vegetable oil. So hold on, let me make sure. Sorry, the marks on my measuring cup are different on the back than they are on the front, so it's a little hard for me to see when I'm doing this. Okay, so I've got my vegetable oil, that can go in. Okay, and then I have 2 eggs, which I already cracked. We'll dump in there. Along with my buttermilk that's been sitting. And you can see, all right, so let's see if I can make this so that you guys can actually see this. Let me grab a spoon. Okay, you can see it, that this has gotten thick and kind of chunky almost, and that's normal. That's that citric acid that did that. It changed the texture here, and that's okay. That's exactly what we want. So now we're going to pour that buttermilk substitute right in there. And I'm going to take my trusty whisk and break up those egg yolks and get this so that it's kind of all mixed together. Okay, so now I can put my whisk away. I don't need that anymore. Instead, I'll grab a rubber spatula or rubber scraper, and I'm going to make a well or a hole in the middle of my muffin bowl. So let me kind of show you that. All right, so I have got like a hole that I made in the middle of the dry ingredients. And what I'm going to do is pour this whole thing right in here. And this is going to create my batter. Now, when I start mixing this, I want to be really careful not to overdevelop gluten. And gluten is not an ingredient. Gluten is something that happens when flour and a liquid get mixed together. It's a reaction. It's something that happens to the protein molecules in here. Okay, and we want to mix this just until it appears that all the flour is starting to be touched by the liquid. Okay, so it doesn't look powdery anymore. Now, before I mix it further, let's talk about the star of the show, blueberries. I have, it tells us that we need 2 cups of fresh or frozen blueberries. What you want to be careful of is when you add these blueberries is making sure that when you put them in, you want to be careful to not have to mix a ton more, because you will start to crush those blueberries and it'll make your batter purple. Especially if you're using frozen blueberries, leave them frozen until you're ready to put them in. Otherwise, they will definitely get kind of mushy from defrosting. They're totally fine to be frozen. I'm actually going to put some of mine in now, and I'm going to leave out a few blueberries, and I'll show you my secret with that in just a second. You don't have to do this way, but I like to do this way. And now that the blueberries are in there, I want to be doing a gentle folding of the mixture, where I'm kind of turning the bowl and I'm folding those blueberries in. If any of you watch Schitt's Creek, you're thinking about Moira and David folding in the cheese. Maybe, maybe not. All right, so I've got these blueberries in here. My mixture's pretty thick. Let me show you this. All right, it's kind of like a real thick batter. It drops in big clumps. That's the desired effect. The reason I left some of my blueberries to the side, I'll show you in just a minute. All right, so let me get one of my muffin pans here. And I'm going to use a tool that you might not think of using, but comes in super handy for this. And that's my ice cream scooper. Okay, if you have a cookie scoop or an ice cream scoop, this is a great way for portioning muffin batter or cupcake batter. I love using this for this purpose. And you don't want these to be super overfilled, because you want your muffins to get a nice little rise, but not be so full that they end up coming way over the top of the actual little muffin compartment here. And the ice cream scoop helps you keep it as super even as you can, of them all getting a very similar amount of batter. It's portioning, right? Okay. And if you, depending on how much you scoop of batter, you should use all the batter. Depending on how much you scoop in each cup, you may or may not end up with 24. It just sort of depends on how generous you are in these. Now, this is why I like to keep some blueberries aside. I love the visual of there being some blueberries that sort of show through on the top. So I actually take some of my blueberries and just push them in so that they're gonna be that star of the show when the batter bakes around it. This is just kind of like a little Miss V tip, a little hot tip, okay? And you don't have to do this step. It's absolutely not required, but I just like the aesthetic of showing like some of these really pretty blueberries kind of showing through on the top. And then there's another step that I'm going to show you that the recipe tells us to use, our fancy crystal sugar. Okay, so this fancy crystal sugar, you don't have to look too far to find it. Basically, let me just wipe my fingers just for a second here. I'm using this one that's from Wilton. It's actually, this was in with like the cake sprinkle aisle, and it's called white sparkling sugar. But you can also find in like the flour and sugar aisle, there is this product called Sugar in the Raw, and it kind of looks like little crystal sugar. But basically it looks like this. Okay, and it's like, here, let me, if I pour some in my hand, it might be easier for you to see the texture. So it just looks like these kind of big rock candy crystals, and this is what's gonna give me my like bakery crunchy top. Okay, and look at that. Oh my gosh, this is gonna be so good. And when you put it on the batter before you bake it, then these kind of bake into the top and stick on top. It tells you that you need 2 tablespoons of that. That is an estimate, okay? I just kind of eyeball, like you are seeing me here, just pour a little bit in my hand. and then put some on top. Okay. And you know, you just kind of, there's no exact measurement per one. You just make them look however you want. You get to be your own chef there and make your own cool bakery creation. And once you get that fancy crystal sugar on top and you do your other pan, these are ready to go in the oven. Now, if your pans don't fit side by side in the oven and you have to put one on top of each other, halfway through the bake time, you're gonna wanna rotate those pans, and you might even wanna turn them front to back and go top to bottom, because you want them to bake evenly. I'm gonna set up my other pan and bake these. To test them, I'm going to be using the toothpick test. So I will use a toothpick to make sure that I'm not getting any wet batter in on the toothpick when they come out of the oven. Because they're in a muffin tin, they don't have to bake as long as if this was like a whole big cake. So this is gonna take about 20 minutes in the oven. So I'm gonna get these into the oven, and I'll show you when they come out how I test them and how they look as a final product. Okay guys, let's take a look at one of these muffins. So you can see that crystally sugar and how beautiful it is on top. And these are fresh out of the oven. And what I want to show you is that it does not have a really domed top. If I over mixed my batter, that would cause a really big dome to happen. And so I want to show you what a muffin, how we tell in class when you guys would bake these. How do we tell that they turned out correctly? Well, the first thing we look for is, does it have a top that is kind of rustic looking, and maybe you might even have some crackling in it, and is not perfectly smooth and dome shaped. Smooth and dome shaped means we over mixed. And then what I'm going to do is take a knife and just cut right through the middle of this muffin and take a look inside. And what I should see should be a crumbly texture that is not having big, huge air bubble pockets. We call those tunnels, where it almost looks like a little earthworm got in there and tunneled through. And that would mean also that I overdeveloped my gluten by mixing too much. So a perfect muffin has that crumbly cake-like texture on the inside, a crackly top, and it is not smooth or domed, and tastes delicious.